years. My name is Liliana Fonseca, and I'm a research associate at EPRC. Today, we welcome Yingyin Wu, so apologies if I mispronounced that. Yingyin is from the OECD, and she will present on building beneficiary capacity under EU Cohesion Policy. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, followed by discussion. And if you would like to make an intervention, use the raise a hand function in Zoom. So that's at the bottom of your screen under React, or one of those emojis. Or post a question in the chat, and we will address these in the Q&A portion of today's workshop. The webinar will be recorded, which means that you and your colleagues have the opportunity to follow the meeting at a later stage and share, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. It will also be shared by email with you. So feel free to share your thoughts also on social media or on other platforms. And just to present our speaker today, Yingyin Wu is a policy analyst at the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities with expertise in administrative capacity building and the governance of EU cohesion policy. And since 2018, she has worked closely with EU national and regional authorities to strengthen their capacity to design, manage, and implement investment programs. She was a key contributor to the Administrative Capacity Building Roadmap, now applied by managing authorities in over 15 EU countries, and her research and projects focus on subnational public investment, multi-level governance, regional development strategies, and regions in industrial transition across both EU and non-EU countries. She is co-author of the paper Implementing Regional Development Strategies, a Practitioner's Guide, and the multi-level governance chapter in the published book, The Future of City Centers, Perspectives from the Global South. So we are more than honored to have her here presenting on this topic today. I would like to now allow you to share your screen, Yingyin. And thank you everyone for attending today.
Thank you, Liliana, for the presentation and introduction. You pronounced my name perfectly. I'm going to try to find buttons and hope everything just works fine. I hope you can see my screen. Perfect. So thank you very much. Yes, and it's an honor to be here. Thanks, EPRC, for hosting me and giving me this opportunity to share the results of our 2-year study. So the project, as its name, it's focusing on building beneficiary capacity under EU Cohesion Policy. My presentation in the next 30 minutes will include 4 parts. I would like to spend a few minutes just to explain a bit the background of this study. Why did we focus on beneficiary capacity building? How did we do? How was the project like? And then most part of the presentation, I would like to discuss with you a bit the key findings that emerged from the projects, what holds beneficiaries back, and what can be done. Just for the benefits of audience and clarification, beneficiary here, what we mean is really the entities that receive the funds and conduct projects. So it can be ministry, it can be local governments, it can be business or NGOs, but we are really targeting the entities that directly interact with the managing authorities and receiving cohesion policy funds. So without further ado, I will start with the background. Why did we focus on beneficiary capacity building? As Liliana mentioned in the introduction, we actually started working on the topic administrative capacity building since 2018. Of course, with the focus on managing authorities, how they can better build their capacity to manage EU funds. Originally, we had the framework that only have 4 pillars. So at the left side, you can see this is the framework that we use. We look into how managing authorities can better retain talents, people in their organization, how they can better structure their internal organization, up to how they can better plan, etc. And throughout that project, between 2018 and 2020, we heard a lot about beneficiaries, the discussion on beneficiaries. And so we decided at this pillar in this framework. So actually just to say beneficiary capacity building in the OECD approach, we consider it as one part of the administrative capacity building of the system in general. And what we found at that time is that we heard a lot of problems from the beneficiary side. There's have difficulties writing project proposal. There's not enough staff working on EU funds. There's so many things to learn, new concepts coming up every 7 years or sometimes every year. Procurement, it's an issue that it's a word that I've heard in all the meetings that I've worked with managing authorities and everyone. So we have heard a lot of problem in this side, and we were thinking, what can be done? What can the managing authorities help? But we soon so we added this dimension in the administrative capacity building toolkit at that time. We consider, for example, the more tailored or quality support can be provided to them, better communication can be done, etc. However, it's not that easy. If we look back to the 2014-20 programming period, there were over 300 managing authorities across the EU, but there were around 600,000 beneficiaries, and we're talking about 1.8 million projects. So you can see just by the number, it is almost impossible for managing authorities to provide hands-on tailored support to all the beneficiaries. Alongside our work with the European Commission, we also launched this network of heads of managing authorities. And in one of the meetings, we asked these heads of managing authorities what you consider challenge in supporting beneficiaries. And 44% of them consider that developing such targeted support is actually very difficult. So this is a bit the background that we started the study. And one thing we want to really orient this study is not just to focus on managing authorities or not just focus on beneficiaries, because at the end of the day, what we realize is that it's more about the interaction between managing authorities and beneficiaries that can build the capacity within the system. Both entities, beneficiaries and managing authorities, they look at the program implementation from different perspectives. Beneficiaries, of course, will focus more on their project implementation. Managing authorities will look at the program implementation. But all in all, what we are trying to understand, it's not just what the beneficiaries' capacity needs are or what the managing authority need, but how they can work together better so that there's the capacity building within the system. And that's a little bit of background of this study. So within that in mind, when we designed this study, we really try to bring both managing authorities and beneficiaries working together. We consider this as a pilot action. So we have 6 managing authorities working with us. And as you could see from the slide, we really try to target different types of programs for the study to be more robust. So we have national programs such as in Portugal, focusing on sustainability and transport. We also have technical assistance program in Poland. At the same time, we have 3 regional programs in France, so Corsica, in Emilia-Romagna in Italy, and Northeast regional program in Romania. We also include an Interact program, so we really hope the finding of the result can be more applicable to all the different cohesion programs. What we did, just quickly, of course, we first try to understand all the different stakeholders in these 6 programs, managing authorities, beneficiaries, but also we realized there are a lot of entities working around the beneficiaries, including consulting firms, different agencies. We conducted surveys among all the beneficiaries of these 6 programs. So at the end, we have over 1,000 beneficiaries responses. We also talked to a lot of stakeholders, and at the end, we have developed a action plans for each of the managing authorities, and there's a report of the toolkit. One thing that we try to achieve in this study is also to understand the beneficiary journey. What exactly is their experience and journey going through cohesion policy programs? Here is a little mapping in the report. You will see reality is even more complicated than this, because for each stage, they will need different capacities to fulfill the task. So before even engaging in a program, they will need expertise. They will need the technical knowledge to understand the needs, assess and develop projects aligned with the funding opportunities. During the programming, there's a lot of consultation, engagement with managing authorities, but also with other actors on their side. Local authorities will need to consult citizens, for example. There's call and preparation stage, more technical issue, and then there's implementation, etc. So this is just to give you an idea. This is a starting point that we try to do to really understand how is the journey like from a beneficiary perspective. And this is some of the outputs that I've mentioned before, and I will also provide the link in the chat at the end. So now, the key findings. What holds beneficiaries back? This is really the first questions that we try to understand through this study. And the results point to 2 main gaps. The one is a perceived shortage of thematic expertise. Thematic expertise meaning experts that understand social innovation, circular economy, net zero, what those actually mean, what kind of project fits in. And we find this particularly significant among subnational governments, so local authorities, municipalities. The second main finding that we have is, not surprisingly, the administrative burden and procedural complexity. And what we see is that this is particularly a problem for non-public beneficiaries, such as NGOs and business. We will dive into these concepts a bit more with the data. So with that 2 main gaps in mind, what we are trying to understand better, it's also what exactly beneficiaries find difficult or challenging across this long journey. So we break it down to application and implementation stage. What we found is that in the application stage, the most challenging perceived by the survey beneficiaries are understanding the core criteria and indicators, and conducting the ex-ante, so pre-application analysis, so such as feasibility studies, cost-benefit analysis. And over 1/3 of survey beneficiaries identified this is the top challenge when they do the application. When it comes to implementation stage, it's even more interesting. We clearly see two points on the top, over 40% of beneficiaries that is difficult. One, it's project management, which means meeting the project milestone and timelines, really keeping the projects on time. And the second is it's keeping pace with the legislative and regulatory changes that affect their project. What is interesting here is that we see a significant less respondents actually find complying with legislation and regulations as challenge. What they find difficult is to keeping pace with the changes. So it's not like compliance per se pose a problem. It's that the regulations change all the time, and they need to spend time to keep updated and keep pace with it. So here it shows also a little bit across the investment cycle. There are different stage. If we look at the dimension of across the investment cycle, there are different stage different stages beneficiaries face difficulty, and these ones are the particular ones. We didn't just stop there. We also try to understand, okay, so different beneficiaries will face different capacity gaps, but what are actually the parameters behind to that drive this difference? So we identified that a few parameters that will potentially affect the capacity needs of beneficiaries. The first parameter that we found is the program type. So on the graph here, you can see it's basically mapping all the EU Cohesion Policy programs in 2021-27. I think there are two outliers that are not included in this map, but it's pretty much all the programs. We can see a very clear trend that the national programs, which is a dark blue diamonds, they tend to have higher investment amounts. So really go up on the charts, but they tend to have less specific objectives, number of specific objectives. So in a sense, they are more concentrated. This is logical, as in there, for example, national transport programs, they mainly focus on transport sector. At the same time, regional programs, the light blue red circles, we can see they are lower in terms of investment amounts, but they usually cover a lot of specific objectives, which means if it's a beneficiary or even from the program perspective, they will need to really targeted integrated investment so that the limited portfolios of investment can advance multiple objectives. This shows that managing a national and regional program already would probably require different capacities. The second parameter we found that make a difference is the organization type. So here in the study, we mainly categorize them into national public, subnational public, and non-public. So national public can include ministries or public agencies. Subnational public, typically it's local governments. Non-public include business and NGOs and other entities. And how this plays a role on what beneficiaries find difficult or their capacity gaps. So on the left, one key finding we have is only 16% of surveyed subnational public beneficiaries, so such a local government, said that they have sufficient thematic expertise. And this is way more than national and public. This is more significant. This gap is more significant compared to the national public and non-public ones. So in the radar chart here, you can see, for example, subnational public, it's the one of the blue, not the darkest, not the lightest one. And almost all of them actually has a EU project team on office. So they do have the administrative capacity. What they're significant lacking is on the right bottom, they don't have the thematic expertise to understand circular economy, to develop green social innovation projects. So here we can clearly see, depends on which type of organization, you will have a different in-house capacity gaps. At the same time, on the right side, we also see which organization may also play a role of what you find difficult. On the bar charts, we can clearly see, regardless its application, implementation, or reporting evaluation, non-public beneficiaries tend to find this more difficult compared to the others. Last but not least, we also found two interesting parameters, which is project size and experience. And what we found is actually the project size and experience, which means if you have bigger investment as a beneficiary or if you have experience before, actually do not directly play a role on whether you will find assessing and using EU fund difficult. There's no, we run a model and there's no statistically significant correlation between that. What we found, however, is that beneficiaries, those with larger investment and with more experience, they are more likely to report that they are consulted by the managing authorities at least once during the program cycle, which also means if you are a beneficiary with smaller projects or you don't have the experience, you're less likely to be engaged and consulted by the managing authority. The explanation behind is a bit more complicated. Usually, it may not be the intention of the managing authorities, but what we're trying to understand here is the beneficiaries of such portfolios, small and with less experience, they may not be able, or let's say less encouraged, to express their view in the programming stage, in core design, and they are less likely to actively engage. So it's a sign for managing authority, even though not deliberately neglect their participation, but they may signify a need to actively engage them in the process. So those are some findings that from the study mainly focused on the in-house capacity gap, thematic expertise, and administrative capacity that makes beneficiary find difficult. So what can be done? Now we look at the interaction from managing authorities with beneficiaries. And what we found is that actually it has been 3-4 programming periods in the past, and most managing authorities have been put in place a lot of systems and tools to help their beneficiaries. And what this framework and what the OECD study try to propose, it's not to help the system and managing authority move from 0 to better, like to 100. It's really to help them to move from probably 50, 70 to 100, because a lot have already been done. But what we are trying to help here is to propose a framework that for managing authorities, when they're supporting beneficiaries, can go from basic and reactive to systematic and proactive. And we have 4 pillars on this topic. The first one, it's about people and organization within managing authorities. What we see, a typical example is that in the authority, there is a unit working on monitoring evaluation, there's a unit working on cost, there's a unit working on programming. They all support beneficiaries in their own way. It's not quite clear also how far they should support. There's a lot of expertise and information that is often fragmented. So what we propose here is to really be structured, be clear, and also be well organized. Examples of action here can be very simple, clear mission statement just to clarify what the managing authority's role should be to set expectation for the beneficiaries. It can have some written protocols, internal information sections across teams. In some cases, with managing authorities with the resources can also appoint, let's say, thematic experts as an internal contact to support the colleagues or develop a center of expertise. The second pillar here, what we focus, it's really beneficiary needs analysis. When we work with managing authorities, we often heard the story that we've worked with beneficiary for 20 years. We know them well. They pick up a call, they call us, and we will tell them the answer. And they feel like we know the beneficiaries really well and we know how to help them. Often it's true, but the problem is there is usually informal, and that's sometimes the risk of happening what we presented before. The less active beneficiaries, they often get neglected, not on purpose, but because there is no such a systematic analysis from the beginning to gather the evidence. And so here what we are trying to advise, it's also how to do a systematic and regular and active analysis of beneficiary needs. Again, the examples of actions can go from very light, such as just create an Excel document that is accessible by all the teams. So your systematic documents what are the blockage reported by different beneficiaries. In some MAs, they could opt for the option of have a very short pre-call consultation with the beneficiaries before they actually submit the application. Some other ideas is such as simple self-assessment tools or beneficiary journey guide, which is adopted by some managing authority already, to try to really understand from the beneficiary's perspective, where are the gaps when they prepare you implementing the projects. The next pillar is about communication. Again, we all know it's very difficult to communicate a lot of technical terms. There's a lot of administrative burden. Oftentimes, it's also related to how information are presented. Managing authorities often will adopt a one-size-fits-all communication to all the different types of beneficiaries. What we see here again, as going back to the finding, is that the problem is different beneficiaries often face difficult in different things. So here what we are trying to support managing authority is how to do more proactive and really focus on effectiveness, which means the focus is not we have sent the email to beneficiaries, we have shared this information in the workshop, but the focus is whether beneficiaries actually read the guideline, whether beneficiaries actually understand the information. So here there are a few examples of actions. It could be a very simple language checks, a checklist for all the people drafting communication materials with the beneficiary. In some managing authority, they try to implement like online booking system so the beneficiary can directly talk to the right staff without going through many different requests. Mentoring is something we also see quite innovative for more to match more experienced ones with newcomers, and organize case in focus, really to go through one case in particular to foster the understanding of beneficiaries. The last pillar here is a bit more going out. What we are trying to encourage here is that managing authority is not the only entity helping beneficiaries. There are many, many entities out there, national coordination body, even consulting companies, they are or local government association, they are working with your beneficiary, managing authorities' targets. So there's also a need of go beyond, try to understand the external actors, have informal, regular discussions with them. And here one interesting finding we find is there's a lot of discussion of consultants, and the quality of consultants in helping beneficiaries, submitting project, implementing projects, and usually the quality vary, and it's something very difficult to intervene because it's beneficiary's decision. But we also find there's a possibility to provide simple guidance just to help beneficiary how to draft TOR, terms of reference, how to work with consulting companies, etc. So I think here what we're trying to focus on is really understanding system beyond, and really from the beneficiary perspective to identify the actors working around them. So those are the concrete actions. I think I have 5 minutes left, and I would like to perhaps also share a bit more high-level reflection on this topic. Over the 2 years, what we find one key thing is that there's a lot of good examples and how beneficiaries capacity building can be done. If one of the main source of supporting is the use of technical assistance. Here I have a few examples of innovative use in Finland, in Latvia, how they build a system or an office that directly or indirectly support beneficiaries. And what we're trying to do is to really understand across EU how technical assistance have been used to support beneficiaries. But this is quite difficult. On the right-hand chart, what you see is that we try to go through all the code, all the spending code, and identify the one that potentially could be used related to be support beneficiary capacity building, and that is on the category 3. And we see overall indirect programs tend to use a bit more directly in this regard, as well as regional program. But again, this is really an estimate. What we found here is that we think a lot more analysis, a lot more data sharing, and also example sharing would be very important to further the discussion and analysis on this topic. And finally, we do recognize, again, there's a framework, there's an environment where managing authorities and beneficiaries operate. And both of them also need some sort of external framework condition support to make this beneficiary capacity building more effective. From the managing authority side, what we see is that they could benefit from a clearer role of what they should do in beneficiary capacity building. This role of managing authority, it is written in the regulation, but what we see is that different managing authorities often have different understanding how far they need to go to support beneficiary, what is expected from them. So a clear role could be really benefits to also engage and mobilize them to do so, more tools and exchange. And also one of the pillar that we mentioned is about strengthening beneficiary capacity need analysis. And this is something that managing authorities would need support, would need the tools, would need the data, would need the methodology to do so. On the beneficiary side, one thing that we want to keep in mind and share is that they need to want to build their own capacity so that this can be sustained. It can't be forced to them. So there's a need to build these incentives in all these entities to invest in their capacity to using EU funds. One thing we want to highlight is that if the whole system is too complicated, it's very difficult for them to spend time not to focus on those administrative things, but the project content. There's a lot of simplification efforts that have been done, but what we try to advocate here is also a beneficiary, a user-centric simplification. It's not just about the regulations, it's whether they can deliver to the project implementation stage. Last but not least, I think one thing to keep in mind is also to be sensitive of the context. There are many funds other than cohesion policy. Within cohesion policy, there are many programs. Beyond cohesion policy, there are also other funds. In this case, beneficiaries can be stretched too thin, and so they can't really spend time and energy to engage with program authorities or invest their own capacities because there are just so many different things going on that they need to take care of. So I think I would like to end my presentation saying that now we know the problem. We know from the managing authorities' perspective what could be done, but there's also a lot that could enable this in more sustained beneficiary capacity building in the long term. So with that, I end my presentation and I put in here a webpage of the work that we have done on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yingyin. That was a very useful presentation, right on time as well. I'm very impressed. I will now open the floor to questions. I know that we have some people from managing authorities, I believe, in the audience. I would perhaps just try to engage you more in terms of potential cases that people have as well in terms of how they have improved their own beneficiary capacity. I would be interested in knowing what successful examples maybe that you've suggested that they've also implemented. So if anyone wants to come in to that. If anything, what did you find most surprising, sorry, Yingyin, in terms of the data and the study?
I think one thing that we find most surprising it's well, I think I have a couple of points. One thing is what I've presented about this project size and experience. It's not usually a determinant of whether they find things more difficult or not. People always assumed those that have not used EU fund before, or those are smaller entities, let's say, will face more difficulties. But in reality, is that we see this is way more complicated. It depends which program you are in, what kind of capacities that you need, and then it depends a little bit what types of organization. So I think what I think maybe not surprising, but a very important message here is don't assume. Don't assume in all the efforts, because that's what we also think analysis is very, very important. It's very easy for managing authorities or anyone working to dive into their day-to-day operation and think, okay, they don't understand this, let's write a guideline, let's write a manual. They don't understand this, let's do a workshop. But it's very important to, before that, try to look at your beneficiaries profile and see, okay, are they most of them small entities? Are they most of them working on this? What blockage they've reported before we design the support. So I think in a sense it also surprised me that yeah, there's a really rich diversity. I think another thing that surprised me, I would say, is that managing authorities actually have been doing a lot. And this is what I try to convey in the presentation. We are not starting from zero. It's definitely not. This framework and all the solution, it's really how to do better, how to do more efficient. Especially we understand there's a lot of limited resources, time and human capital. So a lot of the action what we're trying to develop here, it's also range from a light to heavy spectrum. There are things that you can do like now, today, next week, making an Excel, talk to your colleagues. There is also things that are more structural changes that if you want, create a center of expertise really targeting beneficiary. So I think this is something we try to explore here as well. It's how to do things better.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to come in at the moment, but if not, I have a couple more questions. Oh, Fabian, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't find the raise the hand button, so here you go. Well, thanks for this this presentation, which I found really interesting because my work is, as you know, is related, and I've done some research, not on administrative capacity or on capacity, beneficiary capacity as such, but on the perception of administrative burden of beneficiaries of a particular region in France, in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, where I used to work in the managing authority until recently. And I think what I find, or what I found, really resonates with your findings in terms of, yes, of course, administrative burden is an issue. Delays, the whole process of implementing cohesion policy projects are too long is another finding. But what struck me most, and I heard it all over your presentation as well, is the issue of certainty, clarity, or what I name as ambiguity. So really, the capacity of beneficiaries to understand what is required of them, when it is required, and how to respond to certain requirements. And this is, to me, in my research, really maybe a conditioning factor that's determining perception of administrative burden, but also administrative capacity, to use the terms of your studies. So I thought that that's what's very interesting to see, that your findings really converge with what I found. In my research, I went a step further and tried to really understand where is it coming from, the causes of the administrative perceptions, the perception of administrative burden. And what struck me is that there are really systematic factors in terms of the rules, the regulatory framework, but also the distribution of responsibilities during implementation. And you've alluded to this dimension during your conclusions, but I was wondering whether you've integrated this dimension in more detail in your studies, or maybe you can elaborate a bit further on how you think the regulatory framework. I'm thinking, of course, of specific rules such as the M+3, so the automatic decommitment rule, or the focus on financial implementation as opposed to quality control, those kind of performance issues, and how far do these factors impact beneficiary capacity?
Yes, thank you for the introduction to your study and also the question. I'm glad to hear it resonates. To your question, I think this actually is something we explore more in the 2018-2020 study when we focus on administrative capacity building for managing authorities, and we see beneficiary support as one dimension. I will share the link as well. And that's actually, if you record the onion that I presented at the beginning, that's what we put in the enabling framework condition. Things that is difficult for managing authorities or beneficiaries themselves to change. And I think we did not directly tackle how these rules will affect beneficiaries, but we indeed had a lot of study analysis in terms of these clarities of responsibilities and rules within the management and control system overall. For example, I think one thing we try to emphasize, and it's a bit linked to this second project, is that there's fear within the system. The managing authorities, they want to be clear, but there's a responsibility behind. And so all the authorities sometimes would say different things. So because there's also all the other, I think this fear, fundamentally, it's probably linked to what you mentioned here. So one thing, again, this study also tried to target is this interaction between managing authorities and beneficiaries, how to not overcome this fear in a sense in the communication. So I think, again, this is, you rightly point out at the end what we mean by a clearer role of managing authorities, because I think a lot of them also struggle as in, should they spoon feeding the beneficiary? Should they explain everything, which is impossible, and where should they stop? Do they actually see themselves as, let's say, a mentor for beneficiary, or are they more the controller of the fund? This is a very tricky business that managing authorities need to balance. And I think there is no clear answer, but it's true that by talking with all the peers, they could find new possibilities, either go one step further or not. So that's why we think there are just so many examples and approaches out there that managing authorities should exchange themselves to identify. So I probably did not directly answer your question. I will definitely share the 2020 study, where you probably will find more answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabienne. Christopher, you raised your hand. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, good. Hello, my name's Christopher Parker. I'm program manager of an Interreg transnational program called the Northern Periphery and Arctic. And our program area goes from the eastern Finnish border right over to the Greenlandic Canadian border, sort of basically north of about 55 degrees. We having 7 program partner countries in our program, of course, have got 7 different administrative cultures to deal with, 3 of which are member states and the other 4 are non-member states. So you can imagine what our administrative burden could be, not only linguistically, where our program language is in English, but the cultures that we have to deal with. And we've had 4 programming periods where we've learned over time that our technical assistance budget is very useful in bringing practically together lead partners and holding, in some cases, thematic seminars with them. But more often than not, when we engage at the very beginning with successful projects and lead partners, we bring them together for lead partner seminars to work them through initial stages of starting their implementation. And for the lifetime of that project with us, over 3 years, for example, we meet with them once a year to give them updates. And I do hear quite clearly the challenges that you've discovered. For us, I think one of the best things has always been is to know our project leaders, meet with them on an ongoing basis so that we can work with them. But project size and experience does, of course, in my opinion, sort of help the better ones along that may have been involved at some point in the 2000s and later on into, a few program periods later. So I'm really pleased to hear what your studies brought up. If I could offer some points of suggestion, there's a group in the Interreg programming world called the Heads of Secretariats of Transnational Programs. And they meet once, maybe twice a year, and they discuss what to do with programs and future programming and ongoing programs. And they're a very useful group to know about, as well as the Interact organizations. There's about 4 of them have Interact points across Europe. And I think your presentation today would be very useful for them to hear what you've learned about managing authorities, because joint secretariats are the sort of the wing or the sort of the subgroup of managing authorities that actually go out and meet with the people and work with the project. So just a couple of suggestions there, but I thank you very much for giving these points. So as I said, it resonates quite clearly with me, having been around for 4 programming periods, how we've grown in delivering Interreg programming, transnational Interreg programming for the last number of years.
Great. Thank you very much for this. I would also perhaps suggest you reach out to the Joint Secretary of the Danube Region Program, which participated in this. So because the project, we also delivered a specific action plan just for them. So maybe you will find some things that, because it's tailored to an Interact program, and it's similar to what you described. They have 13 countries, non-member state, member state, national contact points. It was also quite eye-opening for me as well. So feel free to reach out to the Danube Region Program, and I will be happy to share the finding in the network that you mentioned about and I think you can find my email somewhere. Feel free to share. We'll be very happy to continue the work. I also find Interact program itself has a lot of interesting features as well.
Thank you both. I just wanted to call attention to a comment that Christian Surubero left in the chat. He said it would be interesting to understand if you have an idea of the progress made by different member states in operationalizing the initiative capacity building roadmaps, particularly in relation to beneficiaries. Because through implementing the roadmaps, some tangible progress can be achieved for beneficiaries. What do you think?
That's a great question. So yes, there indeed a study not done by us, but by another entity on the implementation of administrative capacity building roadmaps, because we were actually the one working with the Commission to develop the methodology for this roadmap. So there's another, I think, T33 policy research. They are commissioned by the Commission. And I would be happy perhaps to also share. I will find it somewhere. I know the full report is going to be published soon, but the executive summary is already available. They visited 15 countries to understand the progress and implementation of this roadmap. I think beneficiary capacity building is one of the key pillar in many of the roadmaps. So a lot of countries, they have developed a lot of actions on this pillar. So yeah, I think I would be happy to find and share the link in one way or another. There is in the analysis on this.
Thank you. I think one way that we can share that with everyone is if you send it to Marina, we can compile all the links and send it to the attendees. Yeah. I know that we have just a few minutes until the hour, so is there anyone else that would like to come in with a question or comment? If you can't find the raise a hand function, feel free to unmute yourselves. I know sometimes it can be tricky. But I do have a question still. You mentioned that the non-public beneficiaries sometimes can deal with a lot more challenges. So I was wondering if, for these smaller beneficiaries or non-public ones, which better ways can they be supported to navigate this complex procedure?
Yes, definitely. I think one thing we find quite useful is exactly what we call the Pillar 4 to partner with associations. In a lot of regions or countries, there's usually association like Chamber of Commerce, association and networks of SMEs. There are already quite a lot of managing authorities working with them heavily. So I think Emilia-Romagna region in Italy, it's a terrific example. They have I think it's called communicator network, but basically they really it's a region that have so many SMEs, and they usually not able to directly work with them. So working with those associations and chambers of commerce, it's really, really important. Also, in a sense, to engage them early in the programming and co-design period, because they can offer the view of what works for those small companies and what do not. And another thing to work with, I think it's also something we point out is about the consultants companies. A lot of time, especially business, I would say, they work with consulting company because they don't have the administrative staff in-house to write projects and sometimes it could create problems if this is not used properly, that they may not even know what's in the application. They don't have the ownership, and it's quite difficult to engage them. But what we propose here is to develop some sort of not guidance, because managing authority cannot directly intervene whether how they choose a consulting company, but in a sense it's to set clearly the expectation to those small entities what you should do, like you should be responsible ultimately for the quality, or even give tips of when you're drafting a terms of reference, how you should specify to do this type of thing. So I think another thing working with small entities, it's the network, it's the beneficiary network. In some programs, they managed to put a WhatsApp group. That's the easiest and most effective way for especially small entities to ask questions. So I think a network, and I think in Interact, this is with when we work with the newbie, it's also something we try to explore, is the mentoring, a mentoring system for the more experienced ones, especially when a project like under Interact program, there's lead partner, there's numerous project partner, it's a consortium. So this type of mentoring program can also let them be more engaged.
Thank you, Yingyin. Yeah, that's great. I hope to share this seminar with other colleagues and other managing authorities that were not able to attend today, because I think they will especially be interested trying to engage SMEs a little bit more in the process. So thank you, that's very useful. And so since we're about 4 minutes from the hour and trying to leave a bit of time for people to go to another meeting if they have to, I will just close the seminar off for today. Thank you, Yingyin, for taking the time to present your study to us today, to our audience. And of course, thank you to everyone for your interest in today's webinar as well. Our next webinar is a special edition session initiated by the Austrian Federal Ministry for Agriculture and Forestry, Climate and Environmental Protection, Regions and Water Management, which is a member of the EPRC-led EURPA network on European regional policy research. This will take place on the 12th of November, so next week, with Marcus Gruber from Convelop, who will present Making Transformative Innovation Work in Regional Policy. So contact us to register for our mailing list and keep up to date on future events. And we hope to see you again. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you very much.